Welcome to another Northern Monkeys video. This time I'm interviewing a member of the community about their Iron Hands army, why they like them. It's just something good to put on while you're painting, give it a listen. Watch out for some 30k, 40k spoilers, but other than that, have a good time. Well, bit of a different intro to the army here, mate. It's not because of the law or anything like that, it's because you're a Yorkshireman and you spotted a bargain.
Oh yes, oh yes. You gotta keep your eye out for a bargain. Yeah, I mean, I was still into 40k. I was looking at getting a Blood Angels army.
Very cool.
Um, and I had a Blood Angels army when I were a Wheaton as well. But yeah, I got like the basis of the army for like £200, and it were all pretty well painted as well. So that's what originally got me into it. And like looking back on it now, I think it suited me actually well that I didn't have a Blood Angels army because I like running dreadnoughts and vehicles and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Win or lose.
So, like, I guess when you got the army, was it mostly your infantry, like your infiltrators and your aggressors, or did you go with like, did it come with all the big stuff?
I think it came with one Redemptor and the Ironclad Dreadnought. Is the only vehicles that it had with it, and it was like 20 intercessors,
Wow.
the infiltrators, and a couple of characters.
It's pretty wild that, and this was ninth edition, right? You just sort of got back into
Yeah,
it in
yeah,
ninth.
yeah. It went out.
So I guess, and I mean, obviously a lot of people will remember this not as fondly as you, but Iron Hands were eating good for the majority of ninth edition, I've got to say.
I just remembered actually one of the other dreadnoughts it had was the Contemptor dreadnought with the
Oh
twin
God,
las
yeah.
and the Cyclone missile launcher. It's
Oh
not.
God.
Is it a Cyclone?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like the Terminator one, basically, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah. And even in ninth, that was just
Because you can make him a character,
yeah,
couldn't be targeted. Oh my god,
yeah,
horrendous! And he just chip away at your army the whole game, one shot in any vehicles.
yeah. Hitting on twos, re-rolling ones. He were a nice guy. I liked him.
Yeah, 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 definitely. It's definitely the guy you want on your colour. Speaking of that, you said to me that about like this colour scheme is just great, and I've got to agree. Is like everyone likes a bad boy dressed in black.
Yep.
Like it's just awesome. And how do you find painting that though with the white over the black?
So it's interesting you said that because that's what I was going to actually mention. Not only do I think it's like one of the cooler looking armies once it's all set up with the the black and the silver and the grey and the white. Um, I'm not the best painter, so it helps me. You know, lay down the black, put a bit of a dry brush over it. The only difficulty I ever have with painting them is until I got the recipe for painting white because trying to paint white over black absolute nightmare. But I just do a coat of grey now, and it as you can see it makes it pop quite nice. I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I got a question about these guys is like the color scheme's really cool. You've obviously enjoyed doing them. I kind of have this theory that you see these people on YouTube who are like absolutely amazing and like, but you could not paint an army on this scale and have all these options for your units and types of play to the quality that you see on YouTube. So there's something to be said for like that whole thing that like you need to be able to churn an army out to some degree if you want to ever really play it properly. And I guess do you think the Iron Hands, because this army looks absolutely amazing, do you think the Iron Hand scheme like enables that?
Yeah, and that's true, and not even only on YouTube. Like, see, is it Peachy who used to paint for
Yeah,
Games
yeah, yeah.
Workshop? But his job wasn't to paint the character guys. His job was to churn out the 50 guys you see in the background. And I think part of the problem and part of the obstacle for a lot of people getting into army is that all never painted before, or no matter what model you paint, you can put it into Google and there's just some guy who's absolutely
Oh
smashed
yeah,
the model out of the park. But
Michelangelo. Yeah.
yeah, but that's not what the hobby's about. I mean, even in our group, Amish is a better painter than me. Well, I say Amish, I mean all of you. I'm probably the weakest painter in the group, but that don't mean you can't paint.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I mean, very humble of you, but I mean, if you say like being a weak painter doesn't mean you can't have like what 6 to 8 thousand points of, and frankly, very cool looking army.
Yeah, and I mean like the, when you know that you're not the best painter and you really try on a model, like even when I painted the knight, and it's not the best knight in the world, but even when I brought it round, the new guys were like, "That looks really cool,"
Yeah.
'cause just the way it's blocked in, it looks fine.
Striking.
Yeah. Plus William Marshall colours.
Oh, represent.
But that's what part of the hobby is about. And when somebody gives you that little pat on back,
Definitely.
and it's a genuine pat on back. We can all go, "Oh, yeah, that looks good." When in his art, we know it don't. But I remember painting a model a few years ago, and one of my friends went, "Oh yeah, it almost looks good, that," and it genuinely felt like a kicking balls because I'd spent so long trying to get it right, and I'm not one of them guys who, in my mind's eye, it looks good until I put a paintbrush on it.
Well, that's always that thing as well of like, it's harsh for people to say stuff like that, but this army, it's painted to a high standard, I would say, for like, it's more than tabletop ready, but once it's all arrayed on the battlefield, it still looks amazing. Like, you can barely tell the difference between this and some, like, artist opus kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a point as well, that a lot of people need to realise that singly a model might not look good, but when they're all laid out, it sort of becomes one organism rather than just one thing. You're looking at it spread out. Your eyes don't. You're looking at a picture of them now. You're not picking at every single model up and inspecting it. And the ones that are characters, which you probably are going to do that, you're going to spend more time on them just naturally anyway.
So a good point. So you can't talk about a chapter without talking about the Legion, and you can't talk about a Legion without talking about the Primarch. It's just how like 30k works and 40k, like the way that they interact. So Ferrus Manus, my like one book reading of him where he actually appears, is one of his captains. They're fighting against some like alien human conglomerate,
Yeah.
and one of his captains gets caught in like a fairly devious ambush. But he doesn't actually lose his ship or anything. He just lets them escape because he gets caught in this ambush. And Ferrus is just like to his first captain, well, obviously I should kill this guy for that, right? He fucked up. So I guess what's up with that?
So I think you've touched on several very good points there, which we could talk about any chapter. I think any chapter's first captain or equerry should always be being able to rein him in a little bit,
Yeah.
because as you said, the first captain does rein him in there,
Yeah, true.
and
Actually,
and the way he does that, I believe he basically gives him a overseer, doesn't
yeah.
he?
Oh, it's like an Ironfather chaplain kind of guy, isn't it?
Who's
Yeah.
basically going to be there keeping him in line. I think it's one of the problems with Ferrus's character is the whole weakness thing. So he is not bothered about how the job gets done as long as the job gets done, and if the job doesn't get done, then it's a weakness. We could, that goes back to the way that the tribes and stuff war on Medusa. It's just the way he is.
Oh yeah, because they're like, the tribes on Medusa are like constantly sort of warring with each other.
Yeah, and if you look at the way a lot of the other Primarchs solved that problem was to bring them all together. Ferrus were like, yeah, keep at it. That's just going to make us stronger. Kind of, in a weird way, a bit Peter Arbor. I am biased, but I think my gut is it's a little bit. It's not as unfeeling as Peter Arbor in that I think there's a means to an end with him.
Yeah, well, I guess with Perturabo, he like, what did he kill? Like a tenth of his
Yeah,
legionaries, which is
decimated.
completely, that's a bit mad for how supposedly valuable a space marine is. But maybe they weren't as valuable in 30k.
There's a hell of a lot more of them, isn't there? Yeah.
But Ferrus, if I remember, did Ferrus like fight the Emperor when the Emperor showed up on?
Yeah, they had a big contest, and it's and I know it gets memed on, and I'm sure we'll speak about that later. But one of the things that I think people do fail to forget is, like, toe to toe, he could go with pretty much any Primarch, like hand to hand wise. You know.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not like obviously we'll talk about it later, but spoiler alert, he has a scrap with another Primarch, but it's not like that Primarch's a chump.
No,
Like Fulgrim's a beast.
well, not only he's yeah, and weirdly, I actually really like Fulgrim, as you know. I guess I'm in love with them both. I think the point there is Fulgrim's not a chump, but don't forget Fulgrim was losing that fight
Oh, was he?
pretty heavily until the sword took over,
Oh, I
which
did not know
which,
that.
which is kind of hilarious if you think about it, innit? Because it's like, well, so what if there was a greater demon in the sword? You know, weirdly that shouldn't matter to a Primarch, should it? After what Sanguinius did to two greater demons, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, we were sort of talking about it, and we're like, because Ferrus dies very early on in the heresy,
It's
like during,
very early, yeah.
and then no other Primarch. We don't remember. I think one of the Alphariuses dies, and then that's right. That's in the Siege of Terror on
Yep.
Pluto, I think, and then sort of Sanguinius dies right at the end of the heresy, and everyone all kind of, I mean, our theory, I suppose, Angron dies a bit, but comes back.
Yep.
But it's a bit of a shame that, like, I guess you don't get to see Ferrus get developed.
And that's a problem with the whole of the way the Iron Hands have been sort of badly let down by GW, because there's so much you could do with them.
Mm.
But yeah, I agree. Weirdly, as much as I agree, I kind of disagree as well, in that it works so well with the story of him and Fulgrim, is that he's kind of he's kind of used to show you just how far Fulgrim's fallen.
Mm.
I do wish that it had been later on in the series, we'd have got a little bit more of it. But don't forget as well, when they were writing them books, for all they knew, there was only going to be 10 books to start with. So I think
True,
looking
yeah.
back, they'd probably change that given the chance.
And I suppose as a lot of the thing is with the whole book series of 30k at the end of the day is a big retcon.
Yep.
So like I presume at some point it's set in stone that Ferrus died on Isstvan, the first Primarch to die, and like there's nothing the writers just couldn't cram enough in the first because there was probably anthology books, right, with Ferrus in. I don't know if
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
any about any of them.
Yeah. There's a few, mainly short stories and stuff as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if they could go back and do it all over again, I actually think Isstvan and things like that would have probably been like book 9, 10, because they kind of retconned it themselves by going back in time in a lot of the books, didn't they?
I suppose so, but yeah, it's a tricky one, and I mean, I'd like to talk a bit more about that. Like I mean, people in the memes, it's kind of people call it the bromance between those two. So we've got some absolutely beautiful art here. So Fulgrim with the lair blade fighting Ferrus, who I believe in this particular depiction is wielding a sword that would have been made for him by Fulgrim.
Yeah, it's Fireblade, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty rad. And I guess their legions are clashing around them. It's like a big deal. It's very like tragic as well. Like I think Fulgrim feels like genuine remorse after he kills old Ferrus, right?
Yeah, I think it's when Ferrus dies that that's when he finally gives himself to Slaanesh, isn't it? Do you want me to make the pain go away kind of deal.
I mean that's cool as well. That like because they're Bond. I mean, I really like that story about them. Like they get into like they meet each other and they're both a bit too like haughty and they think they're the best. And then they eventually, I think they have a weapon smithing competition, and they both declare the other one the victor. And it's a nice story. Like it's kind of cute in a lot of ways for 40k.
Yeah, and you know, you are going to feel a bit what's the word? You are going to feel a bit less of a man when someone as beautiful as Fulgrim walks in with his hair and your nickname's the Gorgon. Like it'd be very unusual to have the nickname the Gorgon and be a handsome chappy now, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I suppose this is as good a time as any to sort of destroy this talk of poetic brotherhood with Ferrus Manus and his iron hands and his metal hands. What's your take on that? I don't want to call it a travesty of writing and naming conventions, but I don't know another word.
No, kind of agree. That's Games Workshop for you. That's when you're trying to make something serious that was probably not never meant to be serious.
Yeah.
And for all they knew, the game were going to last 5 years, and then they were going to write another one, and maybe with some better names.
And I mean, objectively, the name Ferrus Manus, it's a cool name. Sounds tough as hell. Sounds Greek, Greco-Roman.
But to be fair, you know, one that's always annoyed me that nobody ever speaks about is the Lunar Wolves and the Space Wolves. That one to me's always like super annoyed me, and it.
Just that they're called like both called wolves.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I suppose someone might, but it's for the person in the comments going, actually, the look of Fenrica in 30k.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we're calling you out right now. Press the backspace bar and don't stop.
And also, to be fair, that's usually us. So.
But I mean, one thing you pointed out, I sort of brought up, well, all the loyalist Primarchs lost on Isstvan. You know, what was it? Conrad Kurz, I think, don't know if he let the Raven Guard guy away. Vulcan got captured though, and there was none of the loyalists like came out looking great from Isstvan. It was a bad place, and that's kind of caused the Iron Hands have got beef about that, I guess, because their dad died.
Yeah, we don't speak the name of the Salamanders or the Raven Guard, even though I just bought Corvus Corax Mini.
Primarch model. But they're kind of cool like that. I guess that idea that they're still mad at each other like all these years later, just like the Iron Hands never really haven't recovered psychologically up to this day, really.
Yeah, because I think if I remember rightly, they wanted to stop and rearm, and Ferrus was a bit of an angry boy at his friend and closest brother, really. I mean. Let's be real. It's kind of a tragic story.
Oh yeah, it's a Greek epic, right?
Yeah, except in Greek epics, they normally have better looking swords than the Layer Blade. I absolutely hate that sword so much.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly classic depiction of it in the image here. And even in this great piece of art, it's very. I guess it's a Slanesh weapon.
Yeah, I don't care. It's terrible and I hate it.
But so Ferrus gets his old head lopped off, unfortunately, by that blade. And I think there's some cool lore about, I think it's in one of the late Siege of Terror books, where he's potentially seen at the head of like the Legion of the Damned. It's something they're clearly working towards. I have a theory, but I wonder, what do you sort of think about that?
Yeah, I also think it's a nice way to pull him back in, and GW can release a Ferrus Manus / Legion of the Damned detachment for Iron Hands in Warhammer 18th edition, once all the other Primarchs have come out, probably.
I sort of have a theory that everyone is absolutely dying for them to do Emperor's Children, maybe sometime in 10th, maybe 11th launch. I would really like for them to. I mean, they've been doing a lot of Primarchs lately, so I mean, preferably I would like them to put the Primarchs down, but they're not going to because of money.
Yeah.
I have a theory that Ferrus and the Legion of the Damned may well be like the end of the edition kind of release. If I don't know how the timescales will work, but I mean, if the Emperor's Children are back, that would kind of make sense. I mean, would that? Because it's very different to Iron Hands. Would that excite you as an Iron Hands player?
Yeah, we'd probably get bonuses to fight them, I would have thought. They'll bring Ferrus back with Sanguinius once there's no more models to make.
Well, we can't have the law and the love of the franchise getting in the way of a profit margin.
One thing I think we're skipping over as well, which I think is important to talk about with the Iron Hands, is he was starting to realise just how much it was destroying his chapter, all this basically becoming the T1000, and that's kind of part of the tragedy of the Iron Hands as well, is he would have changed. They wouldn't be the Iron Hands they are now had he survived. I think all of the augmetic stuff, which I do think's kind of cool, and it's especially cool for converting and stuff.
Oh yeah.
I think that'd have been gone from the chapter.
Well, I mean, that's kind of an interesting theory that, like, I guess it speaks to what we were talking about earlier, that like his development was cut short. Which, I mean, it's kind of cool narratively to like think about like what could have been, but it might be nice to actually see it as well.
Yeah, 100%. It'd be if he in some way could come back and be like, lads, what's going on here? You know, what's happening?
Yeah, which I think Gilliman did to some degree, didn't it? It was quite cool.
Yeah. And I mean, don't forget, until Ferrus died, I mean, it would have been quite unbelievable for most Marines to even consider the fact that a Primarch could die.
Mm.
You know, it's. I mean, we know they can die now, but at the time, you know, I mean, even after this, Fulgrim gets shot in the face and just, you know, had a bit of a lie down and they were all right.
Yeah, I guess it's that thing of like the Primarchs have that spirit or that magic or whatever it is about them that like maybe it kind of takes a being like a Primarch to kill a Primarch.
Yeah, that's possible, you know, but he's an Iron Hand anyway. Just stick a robot head on him, he'll be right.
Be right, be right. Walk it off,
Yeah,
Ferrus.
shrug it off, lad. You'll be all right.
And I mean, I only vaguely know about this from I think it's Oculus Imperia, who's a really great lore YouTuber. I'll try and put a link below. People check him out. He did a thing about like the keys of hell. Don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, only a little bit. Only a little bit.
Because the Iron Hands, I think they kind of go a bit nuts after Ferrus dies, right? They just can't take it psychologically, which is, fair play. Like, it's the only thing happening to them.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Like, did his death um affect the way they are in the same way that Sanguinius's did? We don't really fully know to that extent. I mean, like I said, we're saying before, we know that the Legion would have been changed had Ferrus survived. He was talking about like removing the necrodermis from his arms, but then also was the necrodermis just in his arms because he had the silver eyes as well?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a cool bit of lore, the idea that he's got, like, literally, I mean, probably like the remains of some kind of great Necron void construct or a Catan, like, in
Yeah.
him somehow. That's pretty crazy.
I mean, it's also crazy that he 1v1'd it.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, Primarchs can do some crazy things. Choke out an avatar.
Yeah. Punch one to death.
And but I mean, that's the cool. I guess the thing about Ferrus is like he lacked, even though like Sanguinius died at the end of the war, but it was like almost a much more tragic figure. And writers have really kind of delved into that whole like black rage, red thirst thing with Sanguinius and his legion, the Blood Angels.
Yeah, because I actually think that part of the reason that the Blood Angels are the way they are now is all the repressed rage Sanguinius had from trying to be, the figurative angel.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think my good mate, when we were doing our word bearers video, he brought up that what part of the reason that Sanguinius like wouldn't turn from the Emperor was because he was like too keen to impress and too much like wanting people to love him and like fearing for what happened to his legion if he went away. But I think Ferrus of the Iron Hands, he never. I guess he worried about what the legion were becoming, but not what they were had been before him. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's only just popped into my head the way you articulated that with Sanguinius as well. It's because don't forget, like the way the Blood Angels were before Sanguinius turned up, like that was down to their gene seed.
Oh yeah, they were like the Cannibal Legion, weren't
Yeah,
they?
and then Sanguinius turns up and be like, "Nah, mate, we don't do that." Which again, I guess, kind of proves the point I were making about the repression of him.
Yeah.
He was repressing all that rage that he probably had inside, and like you say, was that because he had an obvious mutation? Possibly.
Yeah, whereas Ferrus and his Legion were more like the kind of stoic. They were like, I mean, in many ways, apart from them starting to get a bit chop happy with their own limbs, they were like almost a very perfect Legion for the Emperor.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that kind of does annoy me the way he's portrayed. He's like always portrayed as this like super angry guy. But I think like the artistry with the Fulgrim thing shows just how good of a smith he was. I mean, he was using his bare hands.
Yeah, I mean it's such a cool and evocative, like it's very Hephaestus, very Vulcan, that kind of like, and I love that aesthetic and that influence on 40k and 30k.
Yeah, and a lot of people say, well, who was the better Smith, him or Vulcan? And I guess the consensus in 40k community is um, Vulcan was the better Smith in that the things he made look beautiful, whereas the things that Ferrus made was just to get the job done, which I think is not 100% true when you look at Fireblade, because like he could see the perfect weapon for Fulgrim,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, and I guess that's like that. I guess there is a thing of like him wanting to get the job done. I think he was one of the
Yeah,
earlier finds of a Legion, wasn't he? A Primarch.
yeah, he was the fourth found, I believe,
Oh.
and don't forget he was the fourth found, and one of them three is one of the guys who was never we don't know anything about.
Oh, I didn't know that. So this is an absolutely amazing piece of conversion work by another one of the monkeys to make you a proper like Iron Father Redemptor Dreadnought. I think it's awesome. But if we talk about the Iron Fathers in general, it's like a weird way of running a chapter.
Yeah, so an Iron Father is basically like a cross between a Tech Marine and a chaplain. So, I mean, we need to do a video on chaplains. I think a lot of that is misunderstood, actually, what they do. The whole Leandros thing.
Oh.
But yeah, so they obviously, with using a lot of vehicles, have always had a deeper fondness and affinity for Cult of Mars. So they, an Iron Father basically gets, they're like a Tech Marine, but like I say, they're also like a chaplain. So they normally have black armor. If you see my photos, a couple of my Tech Marines are red. That's just I fancy one, not painting black for a time, and two, having guys who are not quite Iron Fathers yet.
Yeah, well, they stand out really nicely as well. Like, I love having like the blue librarians in my army because I've got a red Space Marines and the like blue spot color just looks absolutely fantastic. So I get that.
Yeah, and like when I was painting my Xiphon, it didn't make sense to me to have a Iron Father flying a plane, a jet. It were more like, no, I still have Tech Marines now. Someone out there might be able to correct me and go, well, they don't only have Iron Fathers, we still have Tech Marines as well. But I'm not 100% on that, to be perfectly honest.
And yeah, in another great naming convention, the Iron Hands have like the Iron Council, right?
Yeah.
Where it's basically they come together and they make like these big decisions for their clan and then their chapter. I guess there's layers to it, right?
Yeah, so they don't technically have a chapter master like the other legions do. They have an Iron Council, and they choose who will, go forward in this campaign or do this or do that. Which is kind of cool, I think. To be fair, as well, it's something that's kind of unique to them, and each whereas the other chapters have what do we call them, companies.
Yeah.
We have clans, so each clan is specific to that does other things. I mean, it works the same. It's just kind of different.
And these are like based on the ancient like clans of Medusa, right? The planet that Ferrus landed on. So I mean that's pretty sweet that like they've kept that system in place for 10,000 years.
Yeah,
I mean it's very 40k.
what's also pretty cool is as well is the me and Carl were talking about actually one day trying to convert one of these, but we actually realised it'd probably be bigger than a board as board, but we are going to do it one day.
25 meters to scale.
Yeah, it was 25 meters to scale, so they basically drive around in big, huge fortress trucks. So each clan's got their own truck that they drive because on Medusa the tectonic plates are always shifting,
Oh,
which some people think that's because Ferrus actually bored into the core, kind of a bit like was it Kurz who went into the planet's crust as well?
I don't know anything about that, but is it the theory that Medusa's also like potentially a tomb world that's like not like maybe Ferrus stopped it from waking up?
Oh, I mean that's possible. I know it's constantly shifting its tectonic plates, so that's why they don't really have bases. They drive around in big land fortresses.
Yeah, and I mean it's really cool them having this weird system that's like I mean it's just something that gives them a bit of flavor, makes them different. The one thing I really liked is I believe there was like a thing called the Moray Schism, where like a sect of the Mechanicus broke off and started like they could see stuff in the Astronomicon and all that. And a group of the Iron Hands, obviously being Iron Hands and their successors and so close to the Mars, they started following these guys. And like when the Martians found out about this other sect of theirs breaking off, they like went and rained hellfire on them and like destroyed them. But the Iron Hands actually like pretty crazy for Space Marines in 40k. They had one of their iron cancels and they just decided, go off and you can't stay here anymore, guys. But anyone who wants to join these guys, get going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to them it was just another clan. It was just another way of looking at things, another way that war should be waged.
Yeah, and I really like that. That they actually. It's kind of crazy to me. That was like one of the first things that actually made me like sit up and pay attention, I guess, to the Iron Hands. That like you'd think, oh well, with ruthless efficiency they routed the traitors in their ranks, but like no, they just logic.
Yeah, because didn't the Blood Angels have something similar as well, where they thought one of them was like a second coming of Sanguinius or something?
Oh, I don't know about that, but you'll have to. Maybe we can do a law thing on that. That'd be pretty cool. Teasing us with all this.
No, I just remember something. There were like a schism in the Blood Angels where he was obviously demon possessed, I think, at the end, but they thought he was like the second coming of Sanguinius, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the Blood Angels would jump at the chance to have old Sangi back.
Yeah, well, I remember, and maybe I'm making this up, but I remember in a far long ago lore, I'm talking like second edition here. Wasn't there something about when they carted Sanguinius' body away, they could still hear his heart beating?
Well, I mean, there's the 40k lore, everything is true, nothing is true.
Yeah, but that's one thing that makes it so enticing, isn't it? That what do we call it? The something narrator.
Oh, the unreliable
That's
narrator.
the one, the unreliable narrator.
Yeah, and I mean, it's awesome, like, all that stuff, like, even you can have it, like, in your head. Like, I mean, this amazing, like, conversion of this, like, Ironfather Dreadnought. Someone could equally go out there and get inspired by, like, the kind of little lore tidbits that we've talked about and make, like, a Demon Sanguinor, or make a, Legion of the Damned Iron Hands Ferrus Manus list.
Well, going back to what is actually good about running Iron Hands is it makes sense lore-wise that you would endear the Iron Fathers so much. I mean, and don't forget, for most legions, becoming a dreadnought's like a horrible thing. To the Iron Hands, that's like, sign me up, brother. I'm there. What? I'm only 2% flesh now. That's ideal to them. So it makes sense. I mean, and also GW, you could sell a model like this that you've made for 30-40 quid and we'd buy it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there isn't a Iron Hands vehicle upgrade kit is an absolute war crime. So obviously the lore's cool and great and everything, but one thing that, I mean, at the end of the day, the lore is in service of selling models. So how do you find those models? Like, obviously you've done a lot of kit bashing, commissioned some kit bashing do have the potential for some amazing models. But how do you feel that they like play on the tabletop?
Well, again, going back to using vehicles, using heavy weapons, it's always, them dice are always better to roll, aren't they?
Big shots.
Yeah, that's it. And like, I love the Gravis guys as well. And we were just talking earlier about, literally, was it today?
Today, yeah.
Yeah, the FAQ where all the Gravis and even Ironfather Ferrus has just been upgraded, which, as you touched on your video before, like, compared to the last edition, he was such a downgrade, and it has been more difficult to play him in this edition because we have Ferrus, and if you use Ferrus, that's your whack. You're not really getting much in way of bonuses. I mean, obviously, you run the detachment for him, but this new thing with the Gravis guys and the heavy intercessors and stuff, yeah, I think they're just going to get better at play.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you did the classic Codex Space Marine things of like Iron Hands, their detachment, and like all the stuff around them took whacks from like completely unrelated, like successor chapter stuffs. Like, oh, the aggressors had to be nerfed because of like stuff that was going on with fire discipline with Ultramarines, and then oh, your Iron Hands detachment had to be nerfed because of stuff Dark Angels and Black Templars were doing. So I guess that it feels a bit bad, man.
Yeah, and I understand why they did this in the new editions. I mean, it helps you with your Red Marines, doesn't it? You can play them however you want.
Yeah, for sure.
But I do think like it lost us a little bit of flavour at the same time. Um, you know,
No
no character dread, and I mean, it it just it stunted us a little bit, and I do think maybe in the next edition we need to go back to you know army specific ones rather than the detachments.
Yeah, I mean it's I think you're never gonna make everyone happy at the games. They've got a bit of an impossible task with the fan base of just like trying to, but they don't often, sometimes it feels like they try and please everyone and do the worst of both worlds. But
Yeah, and I think like when you've got so many different possible units and so many different possible codex combinations, you know, I mean, you're our rules guy. You've seen from the videos. You're very
yeah,
quick to go. Hang on a minute. They've changed this slight little thing. That means everybody's running, you know, L blasters or whatever it'll be.
well, I mean, what is it? Cap Lieutenant Titus with some Hellblasters. That might be quite spicy, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for what is it? A big 10-man blob of your heavy intercessors. Ferrus giving them a 5-up, feel no pain, and 3 OC. Like, that is a hell of a thing to try and shift.
Yeah, well, I've got 10 heavy intercessors that need painting, so I need to get on that.
We'll do a battle report. We've done that little one with the Votan and the Orcs. That was pretty good fun to make.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I would like to see just how many shots you have to fire into that unit to do anything.
Yeah, stick an apothecary near them as well.
Oh God. Hey, no, they can't have that. The apothecary biologist does something unrelated, so I'm
Oh,
safe.
yeah. We need a Gravis. We need a standard Gravis apothecary, don't we?
Yeah, not this nerd, this biologist nerd. We need a medic.
Yeah, that's the one.
So yeah, this is the interior of that dreadnought. Again, I think you said that thing about how they want to be in the dreadnought. Do you think even though it's horrible, like objectively, like
Yep.
you're a corpse rotting away inside of something. But do you think they're just more at peace with that?
Yeah, and it's also like I guess if your whole aim is to keep on replacing your body with robots, like to purge weakness. You know, I don't even know if we touched on that. You know, the whole point of doing that is, the flesh is weak type deal.
Mm.
Um, and if you can just all of a sudden be I don't even know how tall a dreadnought is, 18 foot, something like that.
I wouldn't be surprised if the new Redemptor kind of guys are.
Yeah, so if you can end up as like that, why wouldn't you? I know, like sometimes in law when they've spoke about what it's like to be inside a dreadnought, it's kind of horrific, isn't it? But then the whole thing with the primate, they get burnt out in a Redemptor quicker because they're angrier or something. I didn't like that stuff.
Yeah, nobody liked that. I don't think they've ever like mentioned that again.
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
just pretend that never happened.
yeah, no one wants. I mean, it's one of those bits of 40k lore that this one actually, yeah, this one isn't true.
Yeah. That unreliable narrator strikes again. You are
Damn
a
it,
liar.
James. But yeah, I mean, so I guess my kind of question is, we've talked about this at the beginning. You picked your army kind of on a whim. If that army had been green, maybe you'd be a Salamanders player. But you've stuck with it. You've got all these cool vehicles. You've like really expanded this kind of crazy collection. And I guess it's just like, Iron Hands are kind of probably seen as one of the more shallow chapters, but they've kept your attention. And I guess just round us out with like, why?
I mean, that's true, but I think I'm always that person who's I will play devil's advocate anyway. I mean, you've heard in the video we've become a bit of a Ferrus apologist, but I mean, like they are kind of cool. The chapters that there's not that much about will always, I think, inspire some people. There's not a lot of um, models for Raven Guard, or I actually think that's part of the rise of the all Iron Warriors fan base as well, because all the other Chaos factions were getting love and they wasn't. So it were like, actually, when there's not a lot of lore surrounding something, you can kind of make your own headcanon up yourself. But I think one of the reasons, as I touched on earlier, and if you're out there looking to get into a chapter, then the Iron Hands are great. Like I said, for a starter, it's not too difficult to paint them to an half decent standard. You know, you don't have to paint the flames up them. I mean, if I'd have bought a Salamander's force to start with, my Salamanders would have stuck out like a sore thumb.
Well, yeah, and I mean that is true. There's a beauty in simplicity, right? And
Yeah.
these guys, they can be as ornate and crazy as you want them to be. I mean, like, look at this guy. He's like, those almost look like maggots writhing out of his belly. But at the same time, it's like he's this hero of the chapter, I guess, and he's spreading his ancient venerable wisdom for generations, and it's.
And his love snakes. He's got his love snakes hanging out.
Indeed, he does, and I hope he can share those with future neophytes.
Yeah, and this is it as well. And I mean, everybody's different, but if I had to pick between painting a 5-man squad of Terminators or a tank, then a tank's going to win for me every time. I don't know whether that's seeing my brother have Airfix models as a kid or not being that particularly great at painting the intricate details, but you know. And a tank model such a especially these days, because the tank kits go together so well compared to the old ones, you know.
Oh yeah, there's no more of that like rhinos like just being all warped and curved. You have to go to Forge World if you want that.
Yeah, and especially with the more modern tanks, like I've been surprised with how well some of them have actually gone together. They're really well made. I mean, we're not sponsored by GW, but you know, if you're out there, we'll take it.
Take another couple of Kratos tanks and we'll glue them together.
Actually, that is something I want to touch on. By the way, GW, while I'm kissing your bum, I actually want to stab you in the back now, because you brought the crazy dreadnoughts out. You brought the Kratos tanks. I was first in line to get them, paint them up, loved it, and then they went into Legends. Now, obviously, as you know, Ollie's our guy who plays tournaments. We tend to just play for fun, so we can use our Legions, but I can't remember the name of a dreadnought now. It's doing my head in. Yeah, the Leviathan. There we go. The Leviathan dreadnoughts. I bought 2 of them. I even got a resin one. And then they just went, yeah, you can't use these anymore, lads. Haha.
Yeah, and they stopped rules supporting them, and they stopped. I mean, some of them were a bit busted. It happens.
No, my contempt to Dreadnought was not busted. He was just a friendly guy who liked to shoot people.
Just a chill guy hanging out with his 2 company heroes next to him, making him untargetable, one-shotting everyone's vehicles round after round.
Yeah, I think I played against 10 games of Orcs, and the lad brought a burner bomber or the fighter, and I think every single game he just got one-bombed.
Yeah, I mean, and that, you know, maybe that is what Iron Hands is all about, is being a grump and ruining everyone else's fun.
Yeah, well, as you know, Ollie, as soon as I bought that 3rd Redemptor, I'm like, Ollie, I've got 3 now.
Wicked stuff! Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. I really enjoy doing these interviews, just bantering with cool people from the community, learning more things. Might need to find a Blood Angels player and ask all about what was going on with that new Sanguinius. Sounds really cool. Anyway, like and subscribe. Bye.